I have to hand it to Sky News. It was definitely a bold strategy to try and get the Conservatives to admit they've made a mistake. Possibly futile, but a bold strategy nonetheless. In an interview with the Shadow Business Minister, the line of questioning was basically trying to get them to admit selling the steelworks to the Chinese wasn't the best move. Now, since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, he had this kind of mantra of lie, deny and move on, which he fed into the wider Conservative Party, and it's still there to this day, and you can see exactly this in the interview I'm about to show you. The difference is that Boris Johnson was able to get away with it because his personality. People seem to forgive him or just think it was part of his boyish charm. This lie, deny and move on attitude doesn't work for the rest of the party as a whole, and so to keep his mantra alive, I think is doing them more harm than they realise. Kemi Badenoch keeps proclaiming that the Tories are under new management, yet this attitude of lie, deny and move on hasn't changed, and until they actually stop and stand back and say, yeah, this was a mistake, we could have done this better, or no, we shouldn't have done that, and start owning the last 14 years, rather than just trying to pass the blame off to somebody else, or just use COVID as an excuse. It's only when they start doing that, that's when they're going to start rebuilding their party. And you can see the minister using that same mantra in this interview. Was selling a mistake? It was in the past. Would you do anything different? It was in the past. Let's move on. Some weak and feeble attack on the current government. And because Sky News went with this bold strategy, it just highlights it further how incompetent this makes them sound.
Was it a mistake that your government decided to allow the site to be bought by a Chinese company back in 2019?
Well, there were ongoing negotiations while we were in government last year, so before the election, which would have involved them actually making some significant investment in moving to cleaner steel. And so I think what happened was with the election, the government seems to have dropped the ball, the new government, and hadn't realised the urgency of pursuing these negotiations.
But what about that decision in 2019 by the Boris Johnson government? A mistake?
I know that there was a lot of due diligence done at the time, and it was something that was welcomed by the unions at the time. So I think we've got to put that in the past, recognise that the world is a different place than it was 6 years ago, but also recognise how important this is as national infrastructure and how disappointing it is that despite my colleague Martin Vickers raising this regularly in the House of Commons, the government didn't seem to have any real sense of urgency or any senior level engagement in these negotiations.
But even Ian Duncan-Smith has come out and said, look, it was a mistake. And in order to understand where we go in the future, we have to recognise the mistakes of the past. So I just put that question to you one more time. Do you think it was a mistake that the Conservative government allowed the plant to be in Chinese hands?
Well, look, I think at the time it was a different world, and I know very vigorous and extensive due diligence was done.
And I know that my colleague around the human rights issues around,
of course,
China in 2019.
Now, you know, I think we've got to focus on the fact that we are by moving so rapidly to end our oil and gas production here in this country. Clearly negotiations have broken down, and you know, it seems that whenever this government negotiates that the country is worse off.
So, OK, not a mistake then. It wasn't a mistake.
Again, I know that rigorous due diligence was done at the time, and of course it was not the only blast furnace at that time. So I think what I would like to see from the current government, who have custody of these decisions, is for them to have shown much greater urgency.
Do you know, this is a wonderful opportunity for you here right now with our viewers on Sky News to say, look, it was a mistake, we understand that and we support the government. Do you want to do that this morning?
Well, I think that, you know, I know that it was looked at very rigorously at the time. It was welcomed by the unions, and I think we need to recognise that 2025 is very different from 2019. And we need to focus on the future of this critical national infrastructure and this industry in our country.
I don't know if we're getting an answer here. You know, it's really important that this story, at the heart of it, is communities, is jobs. Ultimately, the Conservative Party were responsible for handing the plant to a Chinese company, Jinye. You guys did that. You're responsible for what's happening now.
and it was a deal that was welcomed by the unions and local communities at the time. So can we put that in the past and focus on the future of this critical industry and just recognise how urgent it is for our government to restart these negotiations and find a way forward that works for the country?
Is this a wider problem of privatisation for the Conservative government? You know, we look at Thames Water and what's happening there. This is a failure of 14 years of Conservative rule, isn't it not?
Well, I think that there's a general consensus. If you hear the Chancellor today talking about investment in our infrastructure, she's always looking for partnership with private equity capital.
Now, it's no secret that I don't like the Tories, but I do want them to be an effective opposition. I don't want the current government to have complete free rein. And the Tories just aren't doing that at the moment. They're just not being an effective opposition. They're still stuck in this old Boris Johnson, yes, everything was brilliant, everything was fantastic. Raw. It's just so frustrating because they need to snap out of it. Because if they don't, they can't actually say how they're going to make the country better. They have to come up with stupid, bizarre reasons why you need to vote Tory. But to find out that, well, you'll need to watch the video that's on screen now.